just before I get into the session, I would want to set a context to this particular session. Now, I think we have so many exams lined up in the further coming month, starting with your TSPSC Group 1, right? How many of you are writing TSPSC Group 1? Neelu, Nidulu, Niyamakalu. Right? Beautiful. Great. And then it is followed by UPSC CSE 2024, which is on June 16th. How many are writing? The future bureaucrats, right? The future does not mean next 5 years, probably this year, right? And I think subsequently we have APPSC Group 2, which is on July 28th, as of now, right? I'll have to put a disclaimer for that reason, okay? How many are writing mains? APPSC Group 2? Okay. Then I think that is followed by APPSC Group 1 mains on September 2nd, followed by UPSC mains on September 20th, followed by TSPSC mains on October 20th. సో మనం ఏం జరుగుతుందంటే ఐ థింక్ ఎగ్జామ్స్ మనందరినీ రౌండ్ అప్ చేసి కన్ఫ్యూజ్ చేస్తున్నాయి. రైట్? కన్ఫ్యూజన్ ఎక్కువ చదువుతాము, తక్కువ చదువుతాము, అసలు చదవం. రైట్? బ్యూటిఫుల్. ఠీక్. సో దాట్ వాజ్ ది ఫండమెంటల్ కాంటెక్స్ట్. ఐ థాట్ that sir, we are reading static and environment, but nothing is happening to us, we are not getting marks. So in that context, I'll put a perspective towards how are the current affairs going to be read, how are the current affairs going to be remembered, which are sufficient for our exams, right? And what is the nature of the course that is going to be for next 7.5 hours? I will give you the current affairs, I will give you the context, and I will also give you some static related to the current affairs, such that in next 7.5 hours, we'll try to cover most of the concepts of environment through current affairs. Right? Because one peculiar trend that we have been observing, be it APPSC Group 1 Prelims, or be it APPSC Group 2 Prelims, or you would see in further UPSC or as well as your TSPSC Group 1 Prelims, is that they are not going for a direct current affairs, but they are extracting the static out of current affairs. I call it as static or current affairs extrapolated. Static is what is being questioned in your exam hall. That is where the difficulty is coming. So I thought I'll conduct this 7.5 hours in that context. I think, right? Is that fine? Is my pace fine? Language? Or should I go for bilingual? I think bilingual will be difficult because I have people coming from other states as well, right? So we'll get into the session. For those who of you know me, or those who don't know me, my name is Gautam, right? I'm a faculty at RCreddy Study Circle. I just finished my UPSC attempts this year, right? 6 prelims, 6 mains, 4 interviews is my track record with respect to this. And I've also given certain interviews in the context of the Indian Forest Service as well, right? So this is one dimension that I wanted to add. We'll get into the business. The first thing that we are seeing is in the context of coral reefs. Now, when you understand this aspect of coral reefs, we see that certain prerequisites for existence of coral reefs. Now, one small disclaimer again, I want you to keep writing running notes. I want you to keep writing running notes because we are going to add on number of value points apart from the slides, right? And one more thing, after these sessions, I will be uploading the slides on my group, right? If you want to access the group, the Telegram group is type everything in caps, you will get that. And you also have right, in both of the Telegram groups, you will be able to get this slides which are going to be discussed for next 3 days. Now, getting into the business. Now, when we talk about coral reefs, we know that coral reefs does not exist in every water body that is existing, but we have certain prerequisites which are present for a coral reef. The first one is we see that the sea surface temperature has to be between 18 to 32 degrees. It has to be around 27 to 40 ppt of salinity to be existing for a coral reef to exist. We'll also have to see that any water body has to be sediment free for coral reef to exist. Then apart from that, you also see that there has to be a mild tidal action. And the reason for the presence of the mild tidal action that are present is for the supply of calcium, because we know that any coral reef which is existing is nothing but a symbiotic relation that is existing between coral polyp and zooxanthellae. We see that there is a symbiotic relation that is existing where your coral polyp fundamentally supplies calcium carbonate, and you see zooxanthellae is going to be a photosynthetic algae which fundamentally provides food. And apart from this, you also observe that coral reefs are also called as filter feeders. Coral reefs are also called as filter feeders. And when we observe the presence of the coral reefs, we see that most of the coral reefs are on the surface, but we also have certain coral reefs which are present at the deeper waters. And those coral reefs which are present at the deeper waters are what are called as black corals. We have something called as black corals. And you have to understand that most of the coral reefs are nothing but their habitats because we have a kind of photosynthetic activity which is existing. But whereas when you look at black corals which are existing at the deep surfaces, which are existing at the deep water bodies, we see that the black coral reefs are nothing but, or the black coral reefs, they depend upon something called as zooplanktons. They do not have a photosynthetic activity, but they depend upon the zooplanktons, which are present in the bottom of the water body which is existing. Now, keeping all of this in mind, the context of this particular news that I am discussing here is we see that there is a lot of coral bleaching which is happening with respect to ocean acidification process. So when we have this lot of process which is going on with respect to ocean acidification, we know in the context of ocean acidification, you will have to understand that ocean acidification is nothing but decline in the pH of the oceans. And when we observe the numerical value of the decline in the pH of the oceans, we see that it was 8.2, once upon a time, now it is around 8.1. That means there is a decline and it is tending towards more acidity that is existing. So that means it is becoming more acidic in nature. That is what is meant by ocean acidification. With ocean acidification, we commonly observe there is something called as coral bleaching. And when we see coral bleaching, we see that coral bleaching is nothing but a discoloration. And coral bleaching does not mean death of the coral reefs. It does not mean the death of the coral reefs, but it probably means the discoloration of the coral reefs, because what do we observe is we see a kind of the dissociation that is existing between the photosynthetic algae, that is your zooxanthellae, as well as coral polyp, which is existing. So this is one common understanding that you will have to have. Then the next thing that you will have to see here is what is the basic status of coral reefs that is existing. When you look at the basic status of coral reefs, we know that in the context of coral reefs, we see that we have one organization or one initiative called as International Coral Reef Initiative, which is existing. And when we talk about this International Coral Reef Initiative, which is existing, you just remember whether India is part of it or not. Definitely India is part of it. And you also have to remember here, I want you to refer to Coral Triangle. There are 6 countries which are part of Coral Triangle. And please remember, as part of the Coral Triangle, there is no Australia. There is no Australia because we know that in the context of southern hemisphere, we see that the largest coral reef is what, my dear? Great Barrier Reef. But when we look at the northern hemisphere, we see that the great and the largest coral reef is nothing but Belize. Belize is the largest coral reef in the northern hemisphere. But whereas when you look at the southern hemisphere, it is Great Barrier Reef which is present. Now, once you understand this, in the context of India, we see that it is existing in Gulf of Kutch, Gulf of Mannar, Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep. And one more small thing that you have to see, that in Gujarat, they have been practicing something called as bio-rock technology. They have been practicing in Gujarat something called as bio-rock technology for rejuvenation of the coral reefs, for rebuilding of the coral reefs. And one more small component that you have to understand, that in Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, you know that Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana is fundamentally meant for what? Blue revolution. That means talking about what? Marine resources to a larger extent. One of the components of Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana is artificial restoration of coral reefs. So that is one small thing that you will have to remember as part of Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. And when we look at this, we also have to understand there is one peculiar type of coral called as staghorn coral. When I talk about this staghorn coral, it is nothing but, when you observe any of your coral reefs as images, what do you see? We see some something like this, right? Something like this. Now, what is happening is when the density of the corals becomes very, very high, when these are high dense, or when these are placed very, very closely at the shallow water, that is what is going to turn into something called as staghorn coral, right? So this is one small thing that you have to understand in this context. Let's move in. We have something called as Brace-Villi Summit. Now, when we talk about this Brace-Villi Summit, we have to understand that this looked into conservation, and not only this looked into conservation, this also looked into the dimensions of sustainable development. And this is something which is related to majorly the ecosystem, which is the riverine ecosystem. And in this, we have three major river basins which are considered. One is Amazon Basin, the other one is Congo Basin, the other one is Mekong Basin. Now, one small homework that I want you to do when you go back is look at the countries which are related to these three basins. What is the one basin? One basin is Congo Basin, the other one is Amazon Basin, the other one is what? Mekong Basin. I want you to look at these three countries, basin countries which are present, such that in case if they go for mapping question in that particular context, you'll be able to answer, right? Then, when you look at this Brace-Villi Declaration, we majorly see that happened in the context of Congo. Not only Congo, that means we see Republic of Congo is different from normal Congo. DRC and Congo is different. Now here what do we see? We have something called as Cuvette Central Region. Now what is the speciality of this Cuvette Central Region? When you look at the speciality of Cuvette Central Region, it is a peatland. And when you look at the peatland, the classification of the speciality of peatland that you have to observe is any peatland that is existing, it is one of the highest carbon sinks. It is one of the highest carbon sink is peatland. And what is the other aspect of peatland? You have to understand is peatland is nothing but marshy region which is existing. It is a marshy region. And as it is a marshy region, we know that there is something called as incomplete decomposition process which goes on in this particular land. And when we have an incomplete decomposition process which is going on, we see that because of the humic acid that is being found in this region, we see that most of the peatlands which are existing are acidic in nature. So one aspect of peatland is it is one of the highest carbon sinks. Not only carbon sinks, we also see it is marshy. It is not only marshy, incomplete decomposition further, which is leading to higher humic acid, which is resulting in acidic characteristic feature of a peatland. So this is one dimension that you have to understand in the context of Brace-Villi Summit. So once you see this, the next thing is we have something called as carbon markets. And what do we observe in the context of carbon markets to a larger extent? A small brief aspect of carbon market. You will have to see that any carbon market is nothing but that's a place where we have the transaction, something which is related to carbon which is going on. And when we look at these transactions which are going on in the context of the carbon markets, we see that one particular dimension that you have to understand here is the concept of something called as carbon credit. And when you talk about something called as carbon credit, what do you understand about carbon credit is nothing but the carbon credit is nothing but that which is issued, or 1 unit of carbon credit is nothing but 1 ton of carbon dioxide. 1 unit of the carbon credit is nothing but 1 ton of carbon dioxide which is present. So when you understand this carbon credit, what happens is it is a kind of financial instrument which is given to the countries for saving some carbon. And what is the value of the carbon? 1 ton of carbon dioxide. That means if I am saving 10 tons of carbon dioxide, it simply means I am having 10 carbon credits. So that is what is one small fundamental understanding that you need to have in this context. Now, carbon markets are the place where countries exchange these carbon credits. And when you observe these carbon markets, we see that the European Union has more than 85% of the carbon markets which are present. If they ask you, that means more than 50% of the carbon markets are present where? In European Union. More than, in fact, 80%, more than 85% of the carbon markets are focused in European Union. As we progress across the session, you will see this dimension as well, right? Now, when you understand this particular, the news article here, they're saying that they are very, very specific with respect to carbon markets in the context of agriculture. And you have to understand that there are some set of greenhouse gases which are fundamentally existing. And we know that some of the very, very famous greenhouse gases are the 6 sigma greenhouse gases which are part of the Kyoto Protocol. And when you look at these 6 sigma gases which are part of your Kyoto Protocol, we know that carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, Then we have something called as HFCs. Then we have something called as PF6, perfluorocarbons, and the last one is SF6. Right? Perfluorocarbon, and the last one is sulfur hexafluoride. These are the 6 greenhouse gases which are categorically mentioned where these are categorically mentioned in the Kyoto Protocol. And Kyoto Protocol was what medium? It is COP3, COP3, right? COP3 with respect to what? UNFCCC. You have something called as UNFCCC, which has been resulted out of what medium? Which has been resulted out of Rio Summit in 1992. So that is one small dimension that you need to understand in this context. Now, once you understand this article categorically says that agriculture happens to be one of the leading sources of methane. And when you look at what are the sources of this methane that is present here, we know that one of the major dimensions is what, my dear? Rice fields. Because we know that what is the characteristic feature of rice? We see that in the context of India, the characteristic feature of rice is what? It is dumpy surfaces, or it is flooded fields. And when we have this flooded field, what is going to happen? We see an anaerobic condition existing. And when we have an anaerobic condition existing, we see that there is an incomplete decomposition which goes on, which results in what? Methane. Which results in methane, because we see the anaerobic bacteria which is acting at the roots of this plant. Now, once you understand this, there is another reason why we have methane existing here, that is enteric fermentation. We have something called as enteric fermentation is a process that goes on here. And when you talk about this enteric fermentation, where is this enteric fermentation going on, especially with respect to animal husbandry? We know that most of the animal husbandry that goes on in the context of India, they are what? They are ruminants. They are ruminants. Why they are called as ruminants? Because they have the capacity to digest cellulose. When they have the capacity to digest the cellulose, they are what are called as ruminants. And when you talk about these ruminants are what are resulting in enteric fermentation. And because of which, what is happening? We see large methane emissions being present. And because of India being dependent upon agriculture to a larger extent, what happened here? India is not the signatory of what? Global Methane Pledge. India is not a signatory of Global Methane Pledge because in the Global Methane Pledge or under Global Methane Pledge, they said that we are supposed to ban the production of methane from agriculture as well as enteric fermentation. But in the context of India, we know that more than 50% of the Indian population is dependent upon what? Agriculture. So this is one small dimension that you need to understand in this, right? Well, we got off, look, you can manage. Okay. Next. The same thing here. Now, one small factual base that you need to remember in this particular article is that we have something called as GROW report. Greening and restoration of wasteland with agroforestry. And who is giving this report? Niti Aayog is giving this report. Who is giving this report? Niti Aayog. In what aspect matter you fundamentally have to understand? Restoration of 26 million hectares. Now here in the context, what happens is we see that more than 30% of Indian land is degraded. We see that more than 30% of Indian land is degraded, and to restore this degraded land, we are going for this particular report which has been given by whom? Niti Aayog. And we know when you talk about agroforestry, one small thing that you need to remember in the context of agroforestry is what, my dear? Agroforestry is nothing but what? Agriculture plus forestry. Savarna Dirghasami, antena? Yes or no? Yes. Right? Then what is social forestry? So, what is social forestry? The forestry which is trying to meet the societal needs is what is social forestry. Right? What is urban forestry? Urban needs కాదయ్యా మీరు మరి అక్కడ సోషల్ నీడ్స్ అన్నా అర్బన్ నీడ్స్ అంట మంచి ఫ్లోగా ఉన్నారు కదా మీరు. వాట్ ఇస్ దిస్? Urban forestry is fundamentally for what? To stabilize the urban environment. To stabilize the urban environment, for example, you talk about avenue plantation. For example, you talk about urban parks. All of these are what we do. These are nothing but urban forestry that goes on. Now, for example, there is one controversy which has been going on in the context of Hyderabad. We know that Hyderabad is not a tree city of the world. It is not a tree city of India. Who gives this concept of tree city? Who gives this concept of tree city? 2021 PY2 statement is the question. The first statement says that tree city. What is the second statement saying? It gives 3 different organizations. Who is giving this? Tree city is given by FAO. It is given by FAO. Please remember, right? And what is the controversy? We have one particular species called as Conocarpus. We have one particular species called as Conocarpus, which has been planted in these regions of Jubilee Hills, Bandara Hills. And the people of the forest department is choosing this Conocarpus as a species for what reasons? It is cheap. But what is the constraint and what is the issue with this species? It is water demanding. It is not only water demanding, it drains a lot of groundwater. And not only that, the pollen grains which are present in the context of this Conocarpus is highly carcinogenic in nature. It is carcinogenic in nature, it is polluting in nature. So that is one small thing that you have to understand in this context.
Now I became a rock star, right? Oh, guitarist, let's perform. Ready, right? So we were discussing about Conocarpus species, and we were seeing that it is all with respect to urban forestry, and we have certain controversy which is existing here. Now, once we see this, next we move upon the next article. Now, this particular report has been very commonly being given, but what is the speciality of this? Now we see there is one organization called as IPBES. You have to understand this. IPBES is nothing but an intergovernmental organization. You know that in international organizations, we have multiple such organizations, my dear. One particular organization is what is seen to be a specialized agency of UN. You would see these statements very commonly. One is specialized agency of UN, or the other one is part of UN, or the other one is intergovernmental organization. Please understand the difference. That when it is talking about intergovernmental organization, only the governmental bodies are present. There is no private organization, there is no participation of private companies, there is no participation of private individuals at all. Only in that basis we call it as intergovernmental. But there are certain conditions which are considered to be some are called as commissions, some are called as committees. Now, in that context of commissions and committees, most of the commissions and committees will have the composition of common man. Will not only have the composition of common man, will also have the composition of private organizations. Please remember this. Please remember, most of the commissions and committees are not intergovernmental, but they are all inclusive with respect to private organizations, government, as well as people. Remember the statements. Now, once you understand this, now when we look at this particular news article, we have something called as HKH region. And when you look at this HKH region, where is this HKH region, my dear? Majorly in this particular region, we have HKH region being present, right? And what is this HKH region? Most of the times we consider that is Hind Kush Himalayan region. And when you look at this Hind Kush Himalayan region, you know that all of these mountains are meeting at something called as Pamir Knot. All of them are meeting at Pamir Knot, and Pamir Knot is known as the umbrella of the world. That is what is one common understanding that you need to know. Now, once you understand, you know that there are Suleiman ranges which are existing. There are, right? There are Kunlun mountains which are present. So all of these are meeting at one point called as Pamir Knot. Now, here what is happening? The whole of the globe has started talking about something called as cryosphere and the status of cryosphere. And when you talk about this cryosphere and status of the cryosphere, you know, cryo means what? Cryo means cold. They are those which are operating at sub-zero temperatures. They are those which are operating at sub-zero temperatures. And when you talk about the sub-zero temperatures, we see one particular region where we have sub-zero temperatures is Arctic. We see sub-zero temperatures at Antarctic. And they're saying that we also see equivalent sub-zero temperatures being present in HKH region. So we will call it as the third pole of the world. We are calling it as the third pole of the world, that is HKH region. Now, what is the problem with this HKH region? We know that one common thing that has been going on because in this context of HKH region is we know that because of climate change, what is happening? The temperature is increasing. When we have the increase in temperature, what is happening? We have something called as glacial melting which has been going on. And when we have something called as glacial melting which has been going on, we see something called as disasters which are taking place. And one common disaster that we see here is what, my dear? One is landslides. Recently, you would have seen the Joshimath land subsidence. Joshimath land subsidence which is being present here. And not only the Joshimath land subsidence, but we also see one very common disaster which has been emerging in the recent past, especially in the regions of Himalayas, in the regions of Himachal, in the regions of Uttarakhand, is what is called as GLOF. What is GLOF? Glacial lake outburst floods. Glacial lake outburst floods is one common disaster that we have been seeing because of the melting of the glaciers which are present. And why is this melting? Because of climate change. On a later date, I will teach you something called as Arctic amplification. Just down the line, I will teach you something called as Arctic amplification. In that particular concept of Arctic amplification, we see this loop of increase in the temperature is constantly going on. And when we see this loop of temperature constantly going on, we call it as a positive feedback mechanism in the context of environment, right? So those dimensions we will see. So in this context, just remember that for the first time, such meeting has been going on in the Southeast Asian region. That is one. Then apart from that, we know HKH region is fundamentally is going to have 8 different countries which are present, and Baki you will read, right? Next. How many of you know La Nina and El Nino? Those are atmospheric circulations and atmospheric concepts. How many of you know El Nino? La Nina? Let me rephrase my question. How many of you are clear about these concepts? Right? Okay, it's okay. Now, one news article fundamentally says that the impact of La Nina has started impacting winter air quality. Now, when you try to understand why, how is this relation with respect to the La Nina as well as the air quality being present? We know that in the context of Indian circulations, we majorly have 2 forms of circulations. One is the monsoonal circulations. The other one is the western disturbances which are existing. And we otherwise call western disturbances as what might be a temperate cyclone phenomena that is existing in the context of India. And when we look at this western disturbance phenomena, what do we commonly see? We see that the subtropical westerly jet stream is what is going to impact this western disturbances. And when we look at these fundamental dimensions of western disturbance that is existing, we know that this western disturbance is that one which is going to bring in moisture from the Mediterranean region. And not only that it is going to bring in moisture from the Mediterranean region, we see that it is going to bring in and it is going to precipitate over these regions during the months of January end or fag end of January as well as initial days of February. And we see that this is what is resulting in a sudden rainfall that is happening during winter season, and that is why we are calling it as western disturbances. The disturbance which has been originating from the western region over the Mediterranean region. Why are we calling it as disturbance? We are calling it as disturbance because it is resulting in a rainfall or unseasonal rainfall during winters. Because what is a categorical feature of any winter? Any winters are classified to be what, my dear? Dry. There is only one world climate where we see wet winters and dry summers. Which region? Mediterranean region. Beautiful. Only in Mediterranean region we see dry summers and wet winters, but rest other 13 world climates that we study, we see that winters are always dry. Why? Why winters are always dry? We see that the air mass which is existing over the earth's surface will fundamentally be cold. And you know that any cold air mass will have low moisture holding capacity. And when you have any air mass which is cold, which has low moisture holding capacity, what is it going to result in? It is going to result in lower rainfall. When it is lower rainfall, automatically it is going to be dry. So that is what is the whole sequence that is existing. Now here what has been happening is, because of this La Nina, when you understand or when you try to understand La Nina, what is that condition? We know that whole of your El Nino and La Nina is a phenomenon that is fundamentally existing with respect to Western Pacific as well as Eastern Pacific. And Eastern Pacific is nothing but west of South American region which is present, and you know that there is one particular oceanic current which is existing here. That is what is called as Peruvian current. And we know that when you look at the direction of the Peruvian current, and Peruvian current happens to be a cold current. And when you look at the Peruvian current happens to be a cold current, you know that just now I told you one supply chain. What is that supply chain? When it is cold, the moisture holding capacity is less. When the moisture holding capacity is less, it is going to be definitely dry. Now here what is happening, I know, because of this cold condition, there is a corresponding high pressure condition, there is a corresponding low pressure condition. I know that for every high pressure condition, there is a corresponding low pressure condition which is existing. Prati Laila ki oka, Majnu, Prati Paru ki oka, Devadas, Prati high pressure ki oka, low pressure. That is what is one fundamental dimension that you'll have to see. So you know that there is a circulation which is going to happen from high pressure to low pressure. In the clear gada. Any wind moves from high pressure to low pressure, right? Now, once you have this high pressure to low pressure, what do you see? We know that there is a convective cycle which is going to happen over the Western Pacific, and when we have this convective cycle which is going to happen over the Western Pacific, we see that there is going to be precipitation which is going to happen over the Western Pacific region. Western Pacific is nothing but east of Australia. Just remember this. East of Australia is Western Pacific, and Eastern Pacific is west of South American region. Now, once I have all of this precipitation happening, and once I see this precipitation going on over the Western Pacific, what do I see? I see that again the dry air mass is going to move, and the dry air mass is going to descend over this western region of South American region. Now, when I have this western region of South American region with the descendants of dry air winds or dry air mass that is existing, what do I see? I see there is one desert which is being formed in this region called as Atacama Desert. That is the reason why we have Atacama Desert. Now, when this cycle gets reinforced, that means when the Peruvian current gets stronger, not only that the Peruvian current is getting stronger, we also see that there is an increase in the high pressure, there is a corresponding increase in the low pressure, there is an increase in the pressure gradient, and because of this, whole of the cycle is getting intensified. Now, when all of the cycle is getting intensified, what do we see? We see more and more rainfall happening over the Western Pacific Ocean. Now, this is what is the condition of La Nina. Now, what has been observed in the recent past? You have something called as the Elsewhere journal, which fundamentally talked about this. It says that because of this La Nina, those winds which were supposed to come over this particular region, because Western disturbances were there. Now, what has happened is now they are being pushed down. Now, you might wonder, sir, what is going to happen if these winds are being pushed down? You have to understand that this particular region is notoriously known for stubble burning. Yes, we would have heard about stubble burning, agrarian emissions. And because of this stubble burning, what is happening is we see that all of the pollutants are now being pushed to which region? Rajasthan region. Initially, they used to be restricted only to Punjab and Haryana region. Now it is being pushed up to which region? Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, this particular region. That is why they are saying that it is not only the emissions which are the reason for the poorer air quality which is existing, but we also see that because of the La Nina which is present and which is resulting in poorer air quality, right? So this is one basic dimension that you need to understand. And one more small phenomenon that has been happening is something called as triple dip La Nina. Now, when you talk about this triple dip La Nina, what do you understand? It is nothing but when this triple dip La Nina continues for 3 years. When it continues for 3 continuous years or 3 consecutive years, we call it as triple dip La Nina, right? And tell me one more thing. Is La Nina a favorable condition for Indian monsoon or not? La Nina is a favorable condition for Indian monsoon. It has a positive correlation with respect to Indian monsoon. And when I talk about El Nino condition, I see that El Nino condition has a negative correlation with Indian monsoon. That is what is one fundamental understanding. Now, what is happening? I also have one more parameter which is going to determine, that is Indian Ocean dipole. I see that Indian Ocean dipole, during the positive phase of the Indian Ocean dipole, it has a positive correlation with Indian monsoon. And during the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole, it has a negative phase of the or negative correlation with the Indian monsoon. So this is what is one small correlation that is fundamentally existing between Indian Ocean dipole and monsoon. And one more small phenomenon that you have to understand. We know that the number of cyclones in the Arabian Sea or the Western Indian Ocean is increasing. The reason why we have the number of cyclones in the Western Indian Ocean or Arabian Sea is increasing is because of the positive Indian Ocean dipole as well as El Nino condition. Because of both of this positive Indian Ocean dipole and El Nino condition, we see that these parameters are, or we see that the number of cyclones in the Arabian Sea are increasing, right? So this is one small dimension that you were supposed to understand. Next, Pineapple Express. Bagundi kada peru? Yes. Now we had Banana Express. Where did we have Banana Express? AP, right? You should know this because it is my state. Please, right? Banana Express was there. It was the first fruit express. Fruits. Fruit express. Where? From where? Andhra. Correct setting. Right? So in the same manner, you see that Pineapple Express. What is this Pineapple Express? It talks about something called as atmospheric river. Now, what is happening in the context of atmospheric river? In normal river, what happens? We see movement of water going on, and from one region, it is carrying the water to other region. Now, in this context, what is the nature of the river? The nature of the river is what, my dear? The nature of the river is stream. Because we know that there are three types of movements of water. One is stream, the other one is drift, the other one is what? Current. And when I look at the variation, I see the stream is the fastest and the drift is the slowest movement, and the mediocre one is what? Current. That is why we call ocean currents. Why do we call them as ocean currents? Because they move at a medium speed. Now, once I understand this particular dimension here, what do I see when I talk about the streams? What is the nature of the stream? They are rapidly moving. In the similar manner, when you look at the atmospheric rivers, what is happening is, you see these air mass which is carrying abundance of moisture is rapidly moving. And when this air mass which is abundantly carrying this moisture and which is rapidly moving, what is it doing? It is taking all the moisture and settling it in one place. And when it is settling it in one place, what is going to happen, my dear? What is going to happen? Rainfall. Now, what is happening, my dear? I'm pumping in all the moisture. In the similar manner, I see the atmospheric river is also pumping in all the moisture, and what is it resulting in? Heavy rainfalls. Heavy rainfalls, right? That is what is one fundamental phenomenon that you have to understand. And where is it more common? In the mid latitudes, and which side of it? Eastern side of it. Eastern side of it, right? So that is one small thing. This is the nickname of the atmospheric river is what is called as Pineapple Express, right? Next, AMOC, very, very high probable this year. In fact, if you ask me, sir, what is the nature of importance, I will say it is VVVVVIMP. చిన్నప్పుడు మనం నోట్స్లో రాసుకునే వాళ్ళం, అవునా కదా? ఓ మీరంతా టెక్స్ట్ బుక్లు చదివి రాసారే, ఎవరు అలా అనిపించట్లేదు. So I see that when I talk about this AMOCs, what is one common thing that I observe here? This is Atlantic meridional overturning circulations. I repeat, Atlantic meridional overturning circulations. And when I talk about this Atlantic meridional overturning circulations, what do I see? I know the name itself says. When I look at the name itself says it's a phenomena which is happening where, my dear? In an Atlantic region. And what is happening? It's a nature of circulation. And what is happening to the circulation? Overturning. Are you understanding? Naam se sab kaam chalna padega. That you will have to learn everything from the name itself, right? Now, when you see what happens, I know what is one common thing that I observe. I see that, for suppose say, now I know that there is this Atlantic region which is existing here, and I know that there are series of streams which are moving. I know one is what is the north equatorial current, the other one is south equatorial current, and the opposite that we have is counter equatorial current. Then we have something called as Gulf Stream. Then we have something called as North Atlantic Drift. Now, what is the fundamental characteristic feature that you need to understand here? That any warm current is moving away from where, my dear? Away from equator. Any cold current is moving towards equator. That is one small phenomenon that you have to understand. And the other phenomenon that you have to understand in the context of warm current is any warm current is less dense, but any cold current is what? It is more dense than warm current. That means when I see that both of this warm current and cold current, just imagine my right hand is cold current and this is warm current. And when these are interacting, what happens? But I know that the cold current is definitely denser than warm current, and definitely it is going to sink. It is going to sink. That is a fundamental reason why when we have this two different currents, that is the warm oceanic current as well as cold oceanic current, when they are interacting, one common phenomenon that we see is what, matter? These are the regions with high fishing regions. That is what we see, Gulf Stream and Labrador current. The other side we see is what? Kuroshio and Oyushio currents. We see that there is a difference in the temperature that is fundamentally existing. One is the warm current, the other one is the cold current. And what happens? We see that there is a sinking of the cold current because of the difference in the density that is happening. Now, once I see this, what is happening in the context of overturning circulations. Now, I see all of the warm water is being carried to the polar region by this Gulf Stream as well as North Atlantic Drift. But what is happening here? From here, I see some Labrador current, I see Canary currents, all of this carrying what? Cold currents. Now, fundamentally, what is happening is when I see these warm currents, the warm currents is going to moderate what? They're going to moderate the temperature. Where are they going to moderate the temperature? They're going to moderate the temperature over the western side of the European region. On the western side of the European region, I see that the temperatures are moderated. That is why we see that the British ports are functional even during winter because of the presence of North Atlantic drift. Now, this one dimension, that means we see that the temperatures are moderated on the European side. Now, what happens is there is a weakening that is happening in the system. Now, that means when they're saying there is a weakening that is happening in the system, or the whole of the system is being weakened, that means what is happening? I don't see, or I no more see this movement of the warm waters happening more, moving towards the polar region. And when I don't see these waters moving to the polar region, what is happening? Will the temperature be moderated? No. The temperature will not be moderated. That is why we are telling it as what, my dear? Overturning circulation. What is overturning here? The temperature is overturning. Why temperature is overturning? Because all of the system has weakened. Now, why is the system weakening? We don't know. Because there are so many phenomena in geography which we cannot account for. Now, for example, if somebody tells you that there is an El Nino condition which is existing, why are we having El Nino? We don't know. When we define El Nino, what do we say? We say it is some atmospheric disturbance. We call it as some atmospheric disturbance because we don't know what is the reason for El Nino. In a similar manner, from past 2 years, we have been observing that there is this phenomenon of Atlantic meridional overturning circulations. Why is this overturning circulations? It is because of the weakening of this whole of the system. With this weakening of the whole of the system, what is happening, my dear? I see that the temperatures are not being moderated. When I don't see these temperatures are not being moderated, now tell me one thing, will I find colder temperatures over the European regions or warmer temperatures? Colder temperatures. That is what is the fundamental understanding that I need to have in the context of AMOCs. That is what we see. If you read the content, that is what it is. And majorly it is observed or it is considered to be an impact of anthropogenic emissions. Did you observe how generally they defined anthropogenic emissions? What emissions? Who is emitting? How are they emitting? We don't know. Anthropogenic. Anthropos ante evaru? Ide santa kada. Right? Beautiful. Next. Global efforts to safeguard Antarctica. आप लोग एक बार देख लीजिए. Because we had Antarctica Act in 2022, which was enacted by India. Antarctica Act in 2022, which was enacted by India. So, isliye I thought I'll put this dimension here. Now, one small thing that you'll have to understand, if you observe 2015 question paper of UPSC, you will see that there was one question which was present for this. But apart from that, if you look, there are 3 stations which are present. One is Dakshin Gangotri, Maitri and Bharati. Now, in this, Dakshin Gangotri has been made dysfunctional. We only have 2 stations which are functional. One is Maitri, the other one is Bharati. What is that one which is present in Arctic region? Himadri. And the one which is present in the Arctic region is Himadri, right? So that is one small thing that you have to understand. Okay. Next. Blue ocean event. You should have got it out, sir. Ocean is already blue. Why are they calling it as blue ocean event? Now you observe this. Now this is where we have one small phenomena called as Arctic amplification coming into the picture. What is happening? That we know that either Arctic or either Antarctic, we know that these regions are what matter, these regions are frozen. And when you know that these regions are frozen, I know that one specific characteristic feature that is present here is what? The permafrost characteristic feature. And when I talk about permafrost characteristic feature, for suppose if I say this is the Earth's surface, and when I say this is the Earth's surface, what do you mean by permafrost? Permafrost is nothing but frozen soil. Permafrost is nothing but frozen soil. That means I see all of the moisture which is existing inside is frozen. And when I see this permafrost region, when I see this frozen soil being present, what do I commonly observe is I know that when I look at any of this cold regions, be it tundra, be it your alpine region, or be it your Arctic regions, be it your Antarctic region, we have some vegetation which is existing. When you look at the nature of the vegetation which is existing generally in this cold regions is what, my dear? One is mosses. The other one that we have is lichens. Then we have something called as cyanobacteria. And we have another specific characteristic feature called as rhododendrons. Rhododendrons. So we see that these are the 4 different kinds of vegetation. These are the 4 different kinds of biodiversity that is existing in a colder region. Now, when I have these different types, I definitely know that anything that is born will have to die. పుట్టినవాడు మరణించక తప్పదు. Yes or no? Now in that context, what you have to fundamentally understand, that any vegetation which is existing in this region will have to undergo a decomposition process. But what is happening to the decomposition process? I see that this particular region is frozen. It is a frozen soil. That means when it is a frozen soil, I fundamentally understand that all of the moisture that is existing here is frozen. And when I see that all of the moisture is frozen, I know that. Now tell me one thing, in cold regions, will we have faster decomposition or in warm regions? In warm regions, we have faster decomposition. But in cold regions, we have slow decomposition because there is no necessary metabolism which is existing with respect to the microorganism. We know that there are 5 different stages which are existing in the context of decomposition. What is fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, and mineralization process. When I say it is a complete decomposition process, I see that when all of the organic substance is transformed into inorganic substance in the form of what? The fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, and mineralization process is complete. When it is not complete, I call it as incomplete. When it will not be complete, it will not be complete when there is lower temperature. Now that means what is happening inside this permafrost, all of the decomposition that is happening is very, very slow. When I find this decomposition happening very, very slowly, what is present? I see that, I know that in any decomposition process, one particular gas which is definitely present is what, my dear? Methane. You have heard about biogas, biogas plant, gobar gas. What is the composition of gobar gas? What is the composition of biogas? What is the composition of natural gas? What is the composition of compressed natural gas? What is the composition of bio-CNG? The composition is methane. Now, when I observe this methane, all of the methane is arrested inside this frozen soil. That means I don't see the methane being released. I see that all of the methane is being arrested inside this frozen soil. When all of the methane is arrested inside this frozen soil, what is happening? I see there is slow decomposition which is going on. That is one condition. But slowly what is happening is because of the climate change. Because of the climate change, what is happening? I see that the temperatures are increasing. Now, when the temperatures are increasing, what is going to happen? When the temperatures are increasing, don't you think? Because of the higher temperatures, I see permafrost melting. And because of the melting of the permafrost, what is going to happen? One side, I see that all of the methane that is arrested inside this permafrost is released. The methane is released. And I know that methane is what? I know that methane is nothing but a greenhouse gas which is existing. And I know that one side methane is being released. And I know that methane is greenhouse gas. And I also know that methane has something called as global warming potential. And when I look at the order of global warming potential, what do I commonly see, my dear? I see that carbon is a reference. Then I have methane. Then I have nitrous oxide. Then I have HFC. Then I have perfluorocarbons. Then I have SF6. The 6 sigma gases, when I observe the global warming potential, this is the increasing order of the global warming potential. The highest global warming potential is seen with respect to sulfur hexafluoride. The least is seen with respect to what? Carbon. Why it is least to the carbon? I see that carbon it is reference. Then next methane, next nitrous, then SF6, then HFC, then PFC, then SF6. Now you see, just because HFC has a higher greenhouse gas effect or higher global warming potential, we have something called as Kigali Agreement. Do you remember an amendment to the Montreal Protocol is what, my dear? Kigali Agreement. In Kigali Agreement, what they have seen in Kigali Agreement, they have seen the phasing out of HFCs. Why phasing out of HFCs? Because it has global warming potential. Is it ozone depleting substance? No. What all kinds of ozone depleting substances are there? We have CFCs, we have HCFCs, we have something called as chloroform, right? We have chloroform. All of these are what, my dear? Ozone depleting substances. Now, once you understand this basic thing, what is happening? I see one side the methane is being released. The other side, what is happening? I also observe the albedo of the region is decreasing. I know that there is something called as albedo. And when you look at albedo, it is nothing but what, my dear? Albedo is nothing but the reflective capacity of a surface. I know that the white surfaces will have larger reflective capacity, whereas the dark surface will have lower reflective capacity. And when I see the Arctic regions, when I see the snow regions, I know that these snow regions are known for higher albedo. But here what is happening? Because of the melting of the glacier, there is a reduction in the amount of the ice which is present. There is a reduction in the amount of the glacier which is present. And when I have decreased glacier or when I have decreased ice presence, what is happening? Will the albedo be increasing or decreasing? Albedo falls. So one side I have methane being released, one side I have albedo falling, and automatically what is going to happen? I see that the temperatures are going to increase. Now when the temperatures are increasing, what is going to happen, my dear? Further melting. melting, release, albedo decrease, temperatures increase. Then again what is happening? Again it is melting, again the whole of the cycle is happening. Now we are calling it as what, my dear? Is it decreasing the effect or increasing the effect? Increasing in the effect. As it is increasing the effect, will it be called as positive feedback or negative feedback? Positive feedback. Right, you're able to hear my voice. Why are you able to hear my voice? Amplification of my voice is happening. Why amplification of my voice is happening? Because there is a positive feedback which is going on. In the same manner, we see there is a positive feedback cycle which has been set in the context of the Arctic region, because of which we see that there is a constant rise in the temperature because of the melting, because of which there is a release of the greenhouse gas, and further which results in the decline in the albedo, which is further resulting in the increase of the temperature. And because of this, what is happening? We see more and more amount of water which is present in the permafrost is being released. That is why we are calling it as what, my dear? Blue ocean event. We are calling it as blue ocean event. Beautiful. Ardhamavutundamma? Yes or no? Shall we continue in the same pace? No? Babu, yes, no. How many are fine? Understanding. How many want me to reduce the speed? ఏదో ఒకసారి లేపన్నాం చూస్తున్నా. రేజ్ ఇప్పుడు ఎవరు చెప్పరు? If I reduce the speed, then this program will go on till June 9th. You want it to happen? You want it to happen? Hope Telangana people know that you have a bonanza now. We have come up with a program that we are going to conduct 2 special sessions on MCQ solving exclusively for TSPSC Group 1 candidates. MCQ solving sessions. Ante enti, we are going to perform Jadoo with MCQs. Who is going to take that session? Chandigarh. Right? Right? That is on 16th and 17th. You already have the necessary flyer is already there in the group, right? You please follow that. Okay? National Green Hydrogen Mission. Now, when we look at this green hydrogen mission, number of things have been going on. But one small fact that I wanted to mention in the context of green hydrogen is Ministry of MNRE, that is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, has come up with an objective definition of a green hydrogen. It says that a green hydrogen is considered to be a green hydrogen if it is emitting only 2 kgs of carbon dioxide for 1 kg of hydrogen. It is emitting only 2 kgs of carbon dioxide for 1 kg of hydrogen. That is, or per unit of hydrogen, it is emitting only 2 kgs of carbon dioxide. That means in the process of the production of the hydrogen, if it is emitting only 2 kgs of carbon dioxide, we consider that to be green hydrogen. Right? That is one official definition which has been given by MNRE in the month of August. Right? Just before COP28 that we had attended, we see that this particular definition has come up. Now, baki ka factual part, you please refer. The next thing that I wanted to tell you here is different types of hydrogens. Now, you always understand, when you look at the different types of hydrogens which are fundamentally existing, one particular dimension that we see is what is the process of production of hydrogen. And when you look at the process of production of hydrogen, we see either it is being produced from ammonia, or either it is being produced from atmosphere, or either it is being produced from water. Can I produce hydrogen from me? हो सकता है. Right? You please understand that. Because my body can also be a source of hydrogen. You please understand this dimension. Now, when I say this, majorly we see either it is ammonia, either it is water, or either it is atmosphere. These are the 3 major sources from where we are able to produce hydrogen. Now, in the process of the production of the hydrogen, we see that there is energy which is needed. Energy which is needed for the process called as hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means what? Lysis means what? Baking. When we bake a water molecule, automatically what do we need? We need energy. And in that context of baking of this particular molecule, I need energy. And the type of the hydrogen is determined on the source of this energy. The type of the hydrogen is determined on the source of this energy. If I'm deriving this energy from renewable energy, for breaking this hydrogen molecule or for breaking this water molecule, I call it as green hydrogen. If I'm deriving it from nuclear energy, I call it as pink hydrogen. If I'm deriving it from solar energy, I call it as yellow hydrogen. If I derive it from natural gas, I call it as what, my dear? Blue hydrogen. If I derive it from natural gas, I call it as gray hydrogen. Then what is the difference between both of them? I see that this is more sustainable. This is more sustainable. This is what, my dear? This is completely fossil fuel based. The gray hydrogen is completely fossil fuel based. Are you understanding? That means what is the source of the energy for deriving this hydrogen is determining the type of the hydrogen. Now, once you're able to understand that, I think the types of hydrogens are very easy. Okay? So that is one dimension that you have to understand. Next, Global Biofuel Alliance. काफी चीज चल रहा है इसके बारे में. अरे इस बार लिख के ले लेना, बायोफ्यूल के ऊपर एक क्वेश्चन है, लिख के ले लेना, right? You please write, because it was already asked in GS3. How it was asked in GS3? In GS3, when you look at question number 7 or question number 8, they asked, with the help of the microorganisms, how are we meeting the fuel shortages of India? That's a 10 marker which was asked in GS3. So when you look at that, what is the fundamental question it is asking? It is asking about biofuels. And when you look at the nature of the biofuels, I know that biofuels can be what matter? Biofuels can be of two types, either bioethanol or biodiesel. And when you look at the process of extraction of bioethanol or process of formation, it is what matter? It is majorly fermentation. Meeku baga telusu deen gurinchi. Fermentation. You ferment. Some of you would have tried also fermenting grapes. Yes or no? When you talk, Allah musi navvulu. Vale unnara meerandaru. Biodiesel, it's a process of what matter? It's a process of trans-esterification. So either it is fermentation or either it is trans-esterification process which is present. Now here when I talk about bioethanol or biodiesel, I see that majorly it is from the natural sources. Majorly it is from the natural sources. Depending upon the source, I can classify my biofuels into two different types. The one particular type of biofuel that I see is basic fuel. The other kind of biofuel that I see is advanced fuel. And I see that this particular classification of basic fuel and advanced fuel is according to National Biofuel Policy 2018. And in this context, what you have to see, you have to understand that there are 4 different kinds of biofuels which can exist. One is the first generation, second generation, third generation, and fourth generation. You see that this 4th generation was not talked upon by National Biofuel Policy 2018. It did not discuss about this. Your National Biofuel Policy 2018 discussed only about these 3. Now, when you look at these dimensions, when you talk about the first generation biofuel, it is that biofuel which is derived from food crops. This is that biofuel which is derived from non-food crops. This is that which is derived from algae. This is that which is derived from carbon negative source. Carbon negative source. If you look at 2017, if you look at 2018, if you look at 2020, we had questions on biofuels being asked. We had questions on biofuel being asked. If you look at 2020 question paper, they asked which of the following can be the sources. In that one eliminating point was horse gram. Horse gram ante entamma? Ulavalu. Ulavalu. You know that any protein source cannot be useful for biofuel. What is the general source which is useful for biofuel? Which has a large abundance of starch, which is cellulosic in nature, which has starch substance. That is what is going to be used for biofuel production. And one common plant that we see in the context of biodiesel is what, my dear? We talk about something called as Jatropha. We talk about something called as Jatropha. And we also have something called as Pongamia pinnata. Very, very similar to Jigar Jingania. Right? So we have something called as Pongamia pinnata. We see that both of them are categorically used for what? They use for production of biodiesel. Right? Now, once I understand this, I also see that India has some program called as ethanol blending program, EBP. Now, or ethanol blended petrol, I see that what is my target? I see the target is 20%. At present, how much have we blended? 10%. How much have we blended? 10%. But what is the target? 20%. Is it mandatory? Mandatory kaapothe nenu enduku discuss chestana. It's mandatory. 20% is the target. How much have we blended? 10%. Some people even claim that we are going to cross 20%. Now, which country is known for blending? Brazil. Brazil is categorically known for large proportion of blending. Right? Baki ka to aap log dekh lena yaar. You can refer to this. Now tell me one thing. I told you what is the composition of bio-CNG? What is the gas? In natural gas, what is the composition? Methane. In CNG, what is the composition? Methane. In bio-CNG, what is the composition? Methane. Please understand. In LPG, what is the composition? Propane and butane. In PNG, what is the composition? Methane. What is PNG? Piped natural gas. PNG is piped natural gas. Bio-CNG, CNG, NG, all of them will have methane. And whereas when you talk about LPG, it is what? Propane and butane. Right? Next. Project Green Sand. Now when you talk about this project Green Sand, now do not be confused by looking at, sir, what is the application of project Green Sand? Don't say it is for construction. Right? Don't say it is for construction. Appudu man samadhi manam kattukovali. Please. Right? What is this fundamentally meant for? This is for carbon sequestration process. This is for carbon sequestration process. Now in any carbon, what do we see? We come across different terms. One is what is called as carbon sink. One is what is called as carbon capture. The other one is what is called as carbon sequestration. Now what is the categorical difference that I see between carbon capture, carbon sink and carbon sequestration? When I talk about carbon sink fundamentally means all of the sources which store carbon which are natural in nature. When I look at this natural perspective, what is it? Plants, trees, oceans. I know that oceans happens to be one of the largest sources of carbon storage or largest carbon sinks which are existing. Now when I look at carbon capture, I see carbon capture is mostly an artificial process of storing carbon. And when I say carbon sequestration is nothing but carbon capture plus utilization plus storage. I see that carbon capture plus utilization plus storage is what is perceived to be sequestration. That means I am not only storing the carbon, I am not only capturing the carbon, but I am also ensuring what? Utilizing the carbon. If you go back and refer to 2017 question paper and 2018 question paper of UPSC, you will see that they asked you that which of the following are used for storing or capturing the carbon. Now you always have to understand that I can store carbon anywhere. Don't you think so? Can I store carbon in me? Yes. Can I store carbon in oil fields? Yes. Can I store carbon in unused coal fields? Anywhere I can store my carbon which has space to fill. Right? That is where we see that in green sand, that is what they were doing, carbon storage project where? Ekkado North Sea lo chestunnaaru. Right? They're doing this. Right? So that is one small thing that you have to understand. You will get those PPTs, don't worry. Right? Just Energy Transition Partnership, JEPTP. Now just understand it's an initiative of G7. It's an initiative of G7. And it is for what purpose? Funding those countries which are coal dependent. Funding countries those which are dependent on coal. Now what are we fundamentally trying to move, my dear? We see that we are trying to move towards something called as carbon neutrality condition. I think as we progress, I'll show you something called as Panchamrit targets, which we had discussed in COP26 in Glasgow. That we had something called as Panchamrit targets, which was given by our Honorable Prime Minister. Right? So we see that carbon neutrality is what is we are fundamentally trying to transition to. Now, what you understand by carbon neutrality is very simple. The amount of carbon emissions from a particular process, when they are equal to the amount of carbon captured. When the amount of carbon that is emitted and the amount of carbon that is captured, when both are same, I call it as a condition of carbon neutrality. But there is one more condition where fundamentally most of the European Union countries are trying to transition. They're calling them as carbon negative status. And when I look at this carbon negative status, what do I understand? I see that when the amount of carbon that is captured becomes greater than the amount of carbon that is emitted. When I see that amount of carbon that is captured becomes greater than the amount of carbon that is emitted, I call that as a condition of carbon negativity. What is carbon neutrality? How much is emitted? I am carrying it or I am capturing it. I call it as neutrality condition. Right? So this JETP program is one such program which is looking into this. Panchamrit, I was just discussing. Remember these at any cost. Right? For TSPSC Group 1, this is one very, very important area. UPSC I will not say. ABPSC Group 2. In paper 2, you have SNT and environment. Right? Context definitely. Net zero by what, my dear? 2070. What is the world telling we will achieve by 2050? మన ఇండియాకి ఎప్పుడు ముందు చూపే ఎంత చూపు 20 ఏళ్ళు రైట్ సో నెక్స్ట్ ఇంక్రీజింగ్ రిన్యూవబుల్ కెపాసిటీ టు వాట్ 500 gigawatts by 2030, meeting 50% of the energy requirement through what renewables, and also reducing the cumulative emissions by 1 billion tons by 2020, reducing emission intensity by 45%. Now all this came up when in COP 26, where this was conducted, Glasgow. And prior to this, we had one peculiar concept which had come up, and that particular concept came up somewhere in COP 21. And when you look at this COP 21, we see this COP 21 was very, very famously known as Paris Agreement. This was a watershed moment in the context of the climate justice as well as the climate diplomacy that has been going on across the global elements or global countries in the context of what matter, ensuring climate justice. Ensuring climate justice and avoiding the conditions of carbon leakage. We'll discuss what do you understand by carbon leakage. Now here in COP 21, we had some concept called as INDC, intended nationally determined contributions. Now in that, we had over 8 INDCs, but for us, it's important for you to remember 3. What is that? We said that we will reduce the carbon or we will create a carbon sink which is worth 2.5 to 3 billion tons. That is one. The second thing that you'll have to remember that we will reduce the emission intensities by 33 to 35%. And it also said 33 to 35% we will reduce the emission intensity. And it also said what, my dear? It also said that 40% of the energy mix I will get from non-fossil fuel sources. Because when I look at the energy basket in the context of India, what is the energy basket in the context of India? I see that energy basket is divided into two. One is fossil fuel based, the other one is non-fossil fuel based. And in this context, I see it is around 59% which is present, and this is around 41% which is present. And when I look at this 41%, out of this 41%, I also have nuclear energy which is present and which is roughly around 1.8% of the energy composition which is present. And when I see what is the 6780 megawatts is what is the value of nuclear energy which is present. And when I look at the other fossil fuel based, what all types of fossil fuel based that I'm having, my dear? Coal, oil, gas, diesel, lignite. Coal, oil, gas, diesel, and lignite. All of these are what? The fossil fuel which is having major composition, right? What is the energy basket today? We are around 450 gigawatts. In total, we are around 400, 450 gigawatts which are existing. What is the proportion of the renewable energy? When we look at the proportion of renewable energy, we see that solar is the maximum, followed by wind. Once upon a time, just 2 years back, we were what? Wind was higher than solar. Now, if you look at day before yesterday's news, we see that we have surpassed Japan in becoming what? The third largest producer of solar energy. We were initially what? We were the fourth largest producers of what? Renewable energy. We were the fourth largest producers of solar energy. We were the fourth largest producers of wind energy. But now what is the proportion? Fourth largest producers of renewable energy, third largest producers of solar energy. Right? So that is one small dimension that you have to understand here. Next. Methane global tracker. Now this methane global tracker is given by whom, my dear? International Energy Agency. You know that International Energy Agency, what is the criteria for International Energy Agency? Only those countries which are part of OECD can be part of IEA. Only those countries which are part of OECD can be part of IEA. How many countries are there in IEA? 30 countries. Is India part of it? Is India part of OECD? Anta growth unda? Ledu. Then why? So we are not part of IEA, right? Then next, Global Greenhouse Gas Watch. It is given by whom? WMO. It is given by whom? WMO. Then next, CO2 emissions. One peculiar trend that was going on here. Now please understand, when I look at the carbon, one of the characteristic features of carbon, it is a pollutant which has been living for long periods. Now whenever I talk about any climate pollutant, I see that there are two types of climate pollutant. One is short-lived, the other one is long-lived. Now when I look at the short-lived climate pollutants, I see that there are a number of short-lived climate pollutants like black carbon, like methane, and HFC. I see that black carbon, methane, and HFC, all these three are short-lived climate pollutants. But whereas when I look at one of the most notoriously known long-term or long-lived pollutant is carbon. Now, when I look at the proportion of carbon that is existing, initially I had around 100 ppm which was present. But now when I look at the proportion or when I look at the concentration of carbon which is existing in the atmosphere, it is around 410 ppm which has been present. That means is the proportion of carbon increasing or decreasing? Increasing. When the amount of carbon is increasing, the infrared radiation component of the solar insolation is going to be more captured. When it's going to be more captured, what is going to happen? The temperatures are going to increase. That is what is called as global warming phenomena. And because of this, I find that there is a change in the average temperature, and this change in the average temperature is what is called as the phenomenon of climate change. So that is what is one small thing that you'll have to understand. Now understand, when you look at all of this, commonsensically, I know that in most of the conditions, I know that the carbon will increase. But there is one peculiar condition if you look, that the industrial processes, the emissions from the industrial processes decreased by 102 metric tons. Rest others from energy, जो भी source से increase हुआ है सिर्फ एक source से it has decreased, and that is what? From industrial emissions. From industrial emissions, right? Now, which is the largest source? Which sector is the largest source for carbon? Transport, agriculture, or energy? Agriculture for methane. Agriculture for methane, carbon. What is the largest source? Energy. More than 40% of the carbon is from energy. इसलिए हम बोल रहे हैं ना that we are going to move towards renewable energy, we are going to move towards green corridors, green energy projects, all of that, right? Now, COP28 is one very, very important area that we have to discuss. A few aspects in the context of COP28 that you'll have to remember. That it was the first time that we had gone for global stocktake. Now, what do you mean by global stocktake? When we were discussing about COP21 and COP21, we talked about something called as INDC, intended nationally determined contributions. That means what is happening in INDC, an individual country is coming up and saying that I will be able to contribute this to regulate the climate change, to regulate the temperature rise. And what is the value that they were fundamentally sticking towards? They were sticking towards 1.5 degrees raise. They were saying that if I follow this particular mechanism, if I contribute to this much, I will see that I will be able to regulate 1.5 degrees. Now, in that context, they said that we are giving something called as intended nationally determined contributions. Now, in this context, what happens is, you know that now suddenly, just like your planning of studies, what do? You come out and say that I'm going to study every day 12 hours. First day you will study. Second day, will you study? Impossible. Third day, first 2 days, third day, fourth day. What is happening here, Mir? Is there any accountability mechanism? No. Now, in order to create a sort of accountability mechanism, the global community had sat down and said, we will take the first global stock take. What do you mean by global stock take? Now, for example, at the end of the financial year, if you are having a stationery shop, what do? You see that how much goods were brought, how many goods are sold, what is remaining. The same thing is being done here. What were the targets that you have given? How much have we achieved? That is what is meant by global stock take. I'm taking the stock of what? I'm taking the stock of my INDCs that have voluntarily declared. Are INDCs imposed by somebody or are they voluntary? They are voluntary. Intended, nationally determined. Nobody else is determining. Who is determining? The nation. So that is what is meant by first global stock take. The second important dimension that you'll have to understand in the context of the COP28 is the loss and damage fund. That loss and damage fund was initiated during which process? Was it initiated during this COP? No, it was initiated during Warsaw. It was initiated during Warsaw. When was it finalized? COP28. When was the rule book for loss and damage developed? COP28. Now, when you try to understand this loss and damage fund, just try that there is a phenomena called as climate financing. And when I look at this concept called as climate financing, one mechanism that I see is I have something called as Global Environmental Facility, GEF. And when I talk about this Global Environmental Facility, what all things I need to know? I know that World Bank is the trustee of GEF, and in the context of India, NABARD is the representative for GEF, And I also see that GEF happens to be a funding mechanism for 5 different conventions. One is UNFCCC, one is UNCBD, one is UNCCD, the other one is Stockholm Convention, the other one is Minamata Convention. I know that Stockholm Convention is fundamentally meant for what, my dear? Fundamentally meant for POPs, persistent organic pollutants. And I know that Stockholm becomes the banning of what? Banning of dirty dozen which is existing. Dirty dozen. Now, when I look at Minamata Convention, I know Minamata Convention is meant for mercury. I think we have seen a series of articles which have been coming for the last 1 week, if you observe, right? If you observe. Now, there was one controversy which has emerged now. You know that UPSC has released its key for 2023 exam. Now, there is one controversy which is going on with respect to the mercury pollution, right? They have taken a different question altogether. So I don't know where is it going to end. Nowhere it will end. I would want one thing. You know what I would want? What I would want? They should reconduct the not all exam, at least interview. Right? Forget my written score is phenomenally decent. At least interview. We won. Oh, on the flow there. Right? I'm happy here. You're not happy listening to me? अरे जोर से बोलो ఎందుకు అంత depression? Yes or no? Yes or no? You don't want to learn more? We will learn more. Pakka, it's my promise. Right? Next. మీరు ఎస్ అనలేదు అనుకో నేను చెప్పను. నేను అలిగాను. బుంగమూతి పెట్టుకుంటాను చెప్తున్నా. The next thing that I see is GCF. Green Climate Fund. When I talk about this Green Climate Fund, it was initially had come up in COP16. And where was COP16 conducted? Cancun Summit. In Cancun Summit, we had GCF coming up, that is Green Climate Fund. And especially what is the dimension with respect to Green Climate Fund? We see that the developed countries are going to support the developing countries in the context of what? In the context of adaptive mechanism. Adaptive mechanism, because what are we running? All of your climate negotiations are running on the principles of what, my dear? Climate justice principles. They're running on the principles of climate justice. And when they're running on the principles of climate justice, what is the imperative of the developed countries? The imperative of the developed countries is what? To support the developing nations. To support the developing nations and to support the least developed countries which are existing here. So one dimension is Green Climate Fund. The other dimension that we have is Mitigation Fund and Adaptation Fund. Mitigation Fund and Adaptation Fund is another thing which is existing here. The fourth thing which emerged in the recent past is Loss and Damage Fund. Now, what is the fundamental difference between those three and this? Is whenever I see this damage that has been created because of the climate change, I see that there are two kinds of damages which can happen because of the climate change. One kind of damage is reversible damage. The other kind of damage that happens because of the climate change is irreversible damage. So far in all our climate negotiations in the financing mechanism, we were categorically discussing about the reversible damages. We never discussed about irreversible damages which were existing because of the climate change. One of the irreversible damages that I keep often stating is increase in sea level rise. Now in sea level rise, what is going to happen? Is it irreversible or reversible? Irreversible, my dear. In bucket lo nil todele. Definitely. So in that context, what happens? It is irreversible damage. Now in the context of irreversible damage, what happens is, we see, Are Babu, don't worry, for irreversible damages also we have one financing mechanism, that is what is called as loss and damage. All these are what? For supporting reversible damages. That is what? Irreversible damage. And what is all of the climate financing that is happening, my dear? You see that through climate financing, we are fundamentally compensating for the loss that has been created. We are fundamentally compensating for the loss that has been created. And one technical term that we can often use in this context is what is called as carbon offset. We can use it as something called as carbon offset. What are we doing in carbon offsets? We see that in the context of carbon offset, we are fundamentally compensating for the amount of carbon that has been emitted. How are we compensating for the amount of carbon that has been emitted? Go and plant trees. Very, very similar to what, my dear? Doing all the papalo and going and taking a holy dip in Ganga. కదా గంగ నుంచి బయటకు వచ్చేటప్పుడు ఒక్కొక్కడు అబ్బా కమల్ హాసన్ అసలు right? The way they will come out is ఇంత మొత్తం దైవత్వం పరమాత్మ అంత వాళ్ళలోనే ఉన్నట్టు. That is carbon offsetting. Who is this carbon offsetting? Who is the person here? Developed countries. Developed countries, right? So what is the fundamental dimension in the context of carbon offsetting? It is for climate justice. Always remember, all of these financing mechanisms are for what? Climate justice, right? बाकी का चीज आप लोग देख लेना यार, काफी factual part है. इसमें remember that which agreements did India did not sign, which agreements did we sign. I have categorically demarcated here. Please look at them, because UPSC is notoriously known for questioning this, right? So either not the signatory or the signatory I have demarcated. Then on each of the initiatives that have been present in COP28, I have been giving you 1 or 2 lines. आप लोग बस एक बार refer कर लेना. I don't want to waste my time on this factual base. ठीक है? There's one more which has been given, the unjust climate report. The unjust climate report which has been given by whom, my dear? FAO. What is this unjust? Some kind of differences are existing between rich and poor, urban and rural, women and men, all kinds of polarizations that are existing in the context of the society. They talked about, right? Unjust report. And you definitely know most of the vulnerable sections are highly affected by these aspects of climate change, right? Yes, a small promotion. ఇంతవరకు నన్ను నేను ప్రమోట్ చేసుకున్నాను. I'll have to promote my program also, right? We are going to have all of the current affairs being revised in 30 hours. By now you got a sample size. Sample size for environment. Yes, I will revise polity, I will revise economy, I will revise SNT, I will revise whatever international relations, a current affairs, right? Subject ఏదైనా చెప్పేదవడు చంటిగాడ, దానిలో మళ్ళా రెస్పెక్ట్ చంటి గారు ఎవడికి కావాలా, right? So 30 hours we are going to have a revision program of all the current affairs. It is starting on May 19th till 24th. మేము మీ ఆస్తులు అడగట్లేదు, right? Some people are charging 5,000, 10,000, right? They are asking you to write down your properties for current affairs. We are not asking, right? I think the valuation of this particular is how much? It is 1,500 plus GST, all affordable. You can come, sit, we will enjoy, right? It is free for HIR people. వాళ్ళ బాధ వాళ్ళది, right? Indians, my dear, Indians. Right? Some people who don't know, HIR is high impact revision. It's a prelims program which has been run by me. కష్టపడ్డా, right? బుక్కులు చదివా, ఎగ్జామ్స్ రాసా, 6 సార్లు క్వాలిఫై అయ్యా, right? APPSC, those are writing APPSC mains. We have APPSC strategic revision. Don't worry, this is completely not by me, right? We have a team of rankers who are going to conduct this program. We have group 1 rankers and we have civil service rankers or UPSC rankers who are going to do this program. And I think the schedule, everything is there in my group as well as in RCreddy IAS study circle group, right? Back into our business. Green bonds. Now when you talk about green bonds, now again you have to understand these are financial instruments. And when you talk about these financial instruments, you have to observe that these green bonds are meant for what? Whatever, you know that the basic understanding of bond is what, my dear? It's a debt instrument or equity? It's a debt instrument. I know that it is a debt instrument. That means initially I'm giving in some money, I'm getting in bond. Now this money, whichever is being collected in the name of this, is going to be used for what, my dear? Is going to be used for sustainable activities or is going to be used for eco-friendly activities. I know that anything which is green is what? Eco-friendly. Anything that is blue is what? Which is related to water or oceans. So that is one basic thing I know. Then apart from that, there is one more thing which I know called as blue bonds. What are blue bonds? Something which is related to what, my dear? Water, marine resources. Marine resources, blue bonds, right? Now tell me, all blue bonds are green bonds? Yes or no? My CSAT, I'm not questioning your CSAT. All cats are dogs, all dogs are monkeys, all monkeys are pigs. నేను అవన్నీ అనట్లేదు, రైట్? All blue bonds or green bonds or not? Yes, all green bonds or blue bonds? No. Please understand that. If you just remember the statement, जो भी blue bonds की तरफ आएगा ना, you'll happily write. ठीक है, next. Debt for climate swaps. Now just understand the small concept. Recently we see Gabon coming up for this. And who was the first country who talked about this? Ecuador. Ecuador was the first country which talked about this. Now what is this happening is, for suppose say if there is some country C1, there is some country C2. Now if C1 is borrowing from C2, right? If C1 is borrowing from C2, now C2 is telling, Babu, you don't pay me, but spend on my green projects. Whatever the value of debt that you have taken, you don't need to pay, but spend on my green projects. That is why we are talking about what? Debt for climate swaps. You would have heard about currency swap agreements. That when two countries have a currency swap agreement, what is the fundamental understanding? That a country can pay back the debt in the domestic currency to the foreign country. So that is what is happening in the context of currency swap. Same thing they are talking about climate swaps. That when you borrow something from me, you don't need to pay back, but you meet my demands in the context of climate necessities, right? So that is one dimension. Is India involved? ఇటువంటి వాటిలో మనకు అసలు సంబంధమే లేదు, రైట్? ఉంటే ఆశ్చర్యపోవాలి. క్లౌడ్ సీడింగ్. So many people have been doing YouTube videos from last few days on this, right? వాళ్ళందరికి పండగ క్లౌడ్ సీడింగ్. ఏదో వాళ్ళే వెళ్ళి ప్లేన్ లో అలా చల్లినట్టు, విత్తనాలు కాదయ్యో, సంథింగ్ ఎల్స్ ఇట్ ఇస్, రైట్? Talk about cloud seeding. Are you actually seeding the cloud? Then what are you doing? Are we supplying the moisture or something else? We're supplying moisture. Yes or no? Chodo. I am scared I will forget what I know. Leave. Now for any cloud formation, I see there is something called as condensation process. When I see that there is some condensation process, I definitely know for any condensation process, I need two prerequisites for condensation. When I talk about these two prerequisites for condensation, one, I talk about something called as condensation nuclei. The other one is what is called as saturation condition. And when I look at this saturation condition, I know categorically that saturation condition is nothing but when the relative humidity of that particular air mass is 100%. That means how much ever the hair mass can hold with respect to the moisture that has been exhausted by the supply of the moisture, where I see that there is a relative humidity condition of 100%, and whenever I have this relative humidity being 100%, I call it as saturation condition. And when I have this saturation condition and when I have condensation nuclei, what is happening with condensation nuclei? Condensation nuclei is nothing but this small nuclei which is existing in the atmosphere. And because of this condensation nuclei, what is going to happen? The moisture which is existing in the atmosphere is going to go and condense. More number of condensation nuclei, I see more condensation process going on. And because of this condensation of the moisture around the condensation nuclei, this is going to result in the formation of what, my dear? Clouds. And when I keep on supplying this condensation nuclei, that is what I'm doing. That is what I'm doing in the process of cloud seeding. In cloud seeding, I'm not supplying the moisture, I'm supplying condensation nuclei. And what all materials I'm using? Silver iodide, potassium iodide, sodium chloride, and dry ice. I'm using all of this to support the condensation nuclei. When I have more condensation nuclei, I have more condensation of the moisture around this condensation nuclei, and further, which is going to result in what? Precipitation. I know what is going to happen. There is a phenomena where I see that there is an interplay of the air drag vis-a-vis the gravitational force which is existing. And whenever I see the gravitational force exceeding the air drag or the air resistance which is existing with respect to a particular cloud, I see that there is a precipitation phenomena which is going to happen at dew point. I know depending upon the dew point, what do I see? I know depending upon the dew point, I see the forms of the precipitation happening. If the dew point is less than the freezing point, I see that there is going to be a condition of solidified forms of precipitation, that is either snow, sleet, hailstorms, all of this. But when I see that the dew point being greater than the freezing point, I see normal liquid forms of precipitation, that is your drizzle, rain, all of these are depending upon the freezing point which is existing, right? So बाकी आप लोग देख लेना यार. You can see marine spatial planning. The name itself says What is the name saying? That I am planning for space where? In marine region. I'm planning for space in marine region, marine spatial planning. For what purpose I'm planning? I'm planning for ecological dimension, economic dimension, as well as social dimension. Whenever I see the triangulation being balanced, the social, economic, and ecological, I need planning. I need planning. Now tell me some committees which are associated with this. Tell me one committee which is associated with coastal regulatory zones. Beautiful, Sailesh Nayak committee. Sailesh Nayak committee is associated for coastal regulation zones, CRZ. Now tell me one committee which is associated for marine resources. Marine resources, one committee which is associated for marine resources. Meena Kumari committee. Meena Kumari committee is associated with marine resources, and Sailesh Nayak committee is associated with coastal regulatory zones, CRZ. We know that there are 4 different kinds of coastal regulatory zones. CRZ 1, no development zone. CRZ 2, CRZ 3, right? CRZ 4. Right? We see, depending upon the high tidal region and depending upon the low tidal region, I see that CRZ is going to be present. Next, green tug transition program. I know anything that is green is what, my dear? Sustainable. Tug is what? Tug is which I use it for pushing. Which I use it for pushing or maneuvering something. I call it as tug. I see that I'm using this green technologies. How am I using these green technologies? I'm using them as fuels. I'm using them as fuels for pushing something or pulling something. Now, in this context, what is the nodal agency which is present here? National Center for Excellence in Green Port and Shipping. Meer ankone excellence ka. National Center for Excellence, right? National Mission on Natural Farming. We keep hearing, no? एक तो ऑर्गेनिक हो गया, एक तो ZBNF हो गया, एक तो NF हो गया. कल न्यूज में क्या था यार? कल न्यूज में एक था कार्बन फार्मिंग. दूसरा, we see different forms. We have biodynamic farming, Vedic farming, different kinds of farming systems are emerging now. Now, what do we commonly see when I talk about organic? The simplest understanding about organic it was everything is natural. The synthetic composition is very, very less. Can I use genetically modified? No. When I look at ZBNF, I see that everything is natural again. But one categorical difference that is existing between organic and ZBNF is what? In the context of ZBNF, no external input. I am not using any external input in the context of ZBNF. That is why I'm calling it as what, my dear? I'm calling it as zero budget. Why zero budget? Because nothing is external. Whatever is the output somewhere is being used as input here. Whatever is the input is being derived as output. So that means there is a constant recirculation process which is going on here. And that is where I see most of the systems are what? Most of the systems of organic or ZBNF is mixed farming systems. They are mixed farming systems. What are mixed farming systems? Mixed farming systems are those systems which are having agriculture as well as animal husbandry in mix. Now, when I talk about natural farming, very, very simple. It is chemical free. It is chemical free. It is climate smart. Now, tell me one crop which is climate smart, which is naturally climate smart. अरे बहुत चर्चा चल रहा है millets. Millets is naturally climate smart. Why? Because it is drought resistant. It is pest resistant. What is the nature of it? It has very, very high shelf life that is existing. Large shelf life. And what is the characteristic feature of millet? Low glycemic index. High fiber content. Does it have protein? Yes. Millets also have protein. Please remember. Low glycemic. Millet will have protein, will have fiber. And millets will also have what? It has large shelf life. Large shelf life, right? So that is one small thing that you have to understand. But you know that there is also financial assistance which is going to be present in the context of National Mission for Natural Farming. Okay. Now, what are the advantages of natural farming? Now, one thing I think you might not be able to see this, but I'll just say. So, ek to reduced pesticides and chemical usage, healthy soil. That means the soil microclimate is protected automatically. Then combat erosion. What forms of erosion? Majorly water erosion. Then it fights the effect of global warming. Why global warming, my dear? We are calling it majorly what? Majorly it is climate smart agriculture. Climate smart agriculture. That means in the context of climate smart agriculture, do you remember we were seeing that agriculture happens to be one of the largest sources of methane emission? Now in climate smart agriculture, will we have that continuing? No. Right? Then apart from that, we have supports water conservation. We have something called as integrated farming systems. Right? Then we have discourage algae blooms. Why discouraging algae blooms? We have some phenomena called as eutrophication. And why is this eutrophication happening, my dear? Eutrophication is fundamentally nothing but what? Eutrophos. Tropho means what? Nourishment. Eu means what? Abundance. Eutrophication means abundance or large nourishment of the lake which is happening. Why is this large nourishment of the lake which is happening? Because of the surface runoff. What is the surface runoff? Majorly derived from agricultural surface runoff. And I know that agricultural surface runoff is what? Point source of pollution or non-point source of pollution? Non-point source of pollution. Because in point source of pollution, I can definitely say what is the source of solution or so what is the source of pollution. I can say this particular industry has released this chemical, this particular industry has released this chemical, so I can call it as point source. But non-point source is what? I cannot demarcate. Your normal domestic waste or sewerage is what? Point source or non-point source? Non-point source. Agricultural runoff, non-point source. I cannot say whether it is from Ellaya's farm, Pullaya's farm, Mallaya's farm. I don't know. I can't say. Now, when I cannot say it is point source or non-point, non-point. So that is one dimension that you have to understand. And you know that this eutrophication will fundamentally result in something called as algal blooms. And when these algal blooms releases toxins, these are what are called as harmful algal blooms, HABs. These are what are called as HABs, harmful algal blooms. When are harmful algal blooms which are present? Because of the release of the toxins by the algal blooms. Why algal blooms? Because of the eutrophication or excessive nourishment of the lake. I know that because of the excessive nourishment of the lake, what is going to happen, my dear? When I see this eutrophication process existing here, what is going to happen to the BOD level? I see the biological oxygen demand will increase when the dissolved oxygen is decreasing. And I also know what is going to happen. I also know that biological oxygen demand is directly proportional to the temperature of the lake. When I see that the temperature of the water body increasing, I know that the biological oxygen demand also increases. And I also see why is this relation fundamentally existing? Because of the dissolved oxygen is inversely proportional to temperature. And not only this condition, what is one fundamental thing that I'll have to see? I see that biological oxygen demand is inversely proportional to the dissolved oxygen. Less the dissolved oxygen, more the demand. Because biological oxygen demand is nothing but the demand side, whereas the dissolved oxygen in a water body is nothing but the supply side of the water body. So I see these are what? These are nothing but the consequences of eutrophication that is existing in a particular water body. Are you understanding? Next. Supports animal health and welfare. The last one is what? Encourages biodiversity. Next. Very, very important again. For the first time, we have gone for a census on water body. Population census water body. What is the data that we use, my dear? 2011. Which year are we in? 2024. How many years? 13 years. How much of population has changed? For every second in India, we have a lot of freedom struggles going on. Now, in that context, look at 13 years. And what we have been, my dear? One definite achievement. Largest populated country. All of my existing students, population is what? Costly or cheap? It is the cheapest thing that is available in India. Why? For kerosene, I'll have to pay at least 1 rupee. For population, free of cost. Barbar ke hai. Right? Ministry of Jal Shakti. This is what it looks into. Then I have something called as irrigation census. To be more precise, the 6th micro irrigation census. The 6th micro irrigation census. Right? It had a convergence with the 6 micro irrigation centers. Now, one more thing that you have to remember, it's an imperative. It is up to you whether you want to remember all of this. But if I was in your place, I would simply remember that all the water bodies are not defined as water bodies. And my consideration in census is all the water bodies are not considered. That is one definite thing, because when they say that some water bodies are excluded, why would I want to remember all of this, my dear? I would rather think and I would rather remember saying that that all the water bodies are not included, but there are some exemptions which are seen. Now, once I understand that basic dimension, one more small revelation that I see here. I see that more of private entities rather than public entities. Look at this, 55.2% with respect to private entities and 44.8% with respect to public ownership. Okay. Then they have given you a definition of water body, and you know that anything which is related to water and air is looked after by whom, my dear? CPCB. CPCB is a statutory body or executive body or constitutional body? It's a statutory body which has been established under what? Which act? Water or air? Water Act. Please understand. It has been established under Water Pollution Prevention Act. It has been established under Water Pollution Prevention Act, if I'm not wrong, 1971. That from where it does it derive its function? It derives its function from air pollution. It derives its function from air pollution. Remember this, my dear. Remember this, right? Some organizations are there which are statutory, and most of the environmental organizations are statutory. For example, Central Zoo Authority, statutory organization which has been deriving its powers from where? Wildlife Protection Act 1972. National Board for Wildlife, NBW. It's a statutory organization which has been headed by the Prime Minister and derives its function from what? Wildlife Protection Act 1972. I also see National Tiger Conservation Authority, which has been headed by whom? Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and derives this function from where? Wildlife Protection Act, right? Are you understanding? Chief Wildlife Warden, deriving from Wildlife Protection Act. Then apart from that, I also have Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. I see that Wildlife Crime Control Bureau is also a statutory organization which is deriving its functions from where? Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Right? Tomorrow we are doing environmental legislations. Extremely important section for UPSC at any cost. Are kal class hai na, likh ke le lena, you will definitely have 4 marks tomorrow at any cost. We are going to discuss environmental legislations because all of the environmental legislations have been amended this year. We see Forest Conservation Act amended, Biodiversity Act amended, Wildlife Protection Act amended, and recently we see that Supreme Court had finalized upon your Gautam case judgment. In Gautam case judgment, what was the debate? The fundamental debate of forest administration in India was what? We didn't have the definition of forest. The Supreme Court came up in Gautam case saying what? They went and said, "Ayah, tell us what is the definition of forest." Supreme Court said, "Define as it is defined in forest." Tuch. And that is what is the judgment that was given in Gautam case, right? And there we will discuss about one peculiar concept called as ecosystem accounting. That is where we have something called as N-Caves project, which has been initiated by World Bank. So we'll discuss about those dimensions. Okay? So first, this is what is one dimension. Okay? Next. Sagar Samruddhi, Ministry of Ports. Now don't be confused, Sagar, don't be confused by Ministry of Jal Shakti, but it is by whom, my dear? Ministry of Ports. Do you remember Sagar Mala? Sagar Mala by whom? Ministry of Ports or Jal Shakti? Hey, Babu, Sagar Mala. Ports, same thing. Sagar, Sagar, Ikkada Sagar, Akkada Sagar. Right, Hussain Sagar. Okay, beautiful. Next it is what? Online dredging monitoring. What is dredging? What is dredging? You scoop away the sand. ఎక్కడి నుంచి? మట్టి ఎక్కడి నుంచి? మన్ను ఎక్కడి నుంచి? From the bottom of the ocean. When you take away, it is removing the sediments or the sedimental load which is existing at the bottom of your water body is what is called as dredging process, right? And it also talks about waste to wealth initiatives, right? And we see that it has been initiated by NTCPWC. And remember, whenever it is something which is related to water, will mostly be having relation with IIT Madras. Mostly. Whenever it is having some relation with biotech, I see majorly it is having relation with IIT Guwahati. IIT Guwahati, right? And whenever it is related to electronics, either it is IIT Delhi, right? I will have to write it in caps. Either IIT Delhi or IIT Bombay. Either of these organizations, right? कभी कभी लोग भी पूछते हैं ना, in groups especially, group 1, group 2, they ask, I don't know for what fun, but they will ask you, this material was seen in news. It was found out by IIT Madras, IIT Chennai, IIT Tirupati, AP అయితే. కానీ ఆ మాత్రం ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఇవ్వాలి ఇక్కడ ఐఐటి హైదరాబాద్ రైట్. డస్ కేరళ హ్యావ్ ఎన్ ఐఐటి? కేరళలో ఐఐటి ఉందా? ఉందా? ఎక్కడ? పాలక్కడ. వెరీ గుడ్. సో వి సీ వెస్టర్న్ ఘాట్స్. నౌ ఐ నో దట్ వెస్టర్న్ ఘాట్స్, హౌ మెనీ స్టేట్స్ ఆర్ దేర్? 6, రైట్. మధ్యలో గోవా, డోంట్ ఫర్గెట్ గోవా, రైట్. వి సీ ఇన్ ది కాంటెక్స్ట్ ఆఫ్ कंजर्वेशन ऑफ वेस्टर्न घाट्स हम 2 कमिटीज है. एक तो माधव गडगिल, दूसरा कौन सा है? कस्तूरी रंगन कमेटी. कस्तूरी रंगन कमेटी. Kasturi Rangan committee categorically talks about over 30% of the Western Ghats are ecologically sensitive region. But in the context of Madhav Gadgil, he says the entire hill region is ecologically sensitive. The entire hill region is ecologically sensitive. Now we also see what matter. UNESCO also categorically talked about what? UNESCO said that Western Ghats is part of World Heritage Site. World Heritage Site. Now we know that this particular region is known for what, my dear? Thick forest. Most of the evergreen forest is present on the which side? Western Ghats side. Why? What is the reason for that? Because of the orographic precipitation that is present because of the Arabian branch of Indian monsoon. Because of the Arabian branch of Indian monsoon, I see the orographic precipitation being present, and because of which I see high density of forest which is existing. And among the Kerala region, among the Karnataka region, among the Maharashtra region, which region has the highest density of forest? Karnataka region. Karnataka has the highest density, followed by Kerala, followed by Maharashtra. Please understand this. That is purely because of the variation in the morphological features of the Western Ghats. I see that Western Ghats are more densely packed in the Karnataka region, then less densely packed in Kerala region, even lesser densely packed in Maharashtra region. Next. National Transit Pass System. Now, so much of development happened after Pushpa. Yes, right? Enti? Aggedele. What was happening in the context of Pushpa? Everybody was smuggling. Slowly they realized that, acha, so much of smuggling happens. One change that I keep telling when I'm teaching you environment is what? That they changed the status of red sanders from near threatened or least concerned. Now it is what, my dear? Endangered. Red sanders. Errachandanam. This is a true fact. After the movie Pushpa, they recategorized red sanders as endangered. They're like, oh, now everybody wants that 4% share. So National Transit Pass System. What do we see in National Transit Pass System? It is talking about timber. It is talking about timber. What is the present system? The present system says that every state needs to have its own permission. Every state needs to have its own regulations. But when you look at the whole of the administrative setup that you observe in the context of India, we are moving for unified systems. We talk about one nation, one ration. We talk about one nation, one election. Yes, we talk about one nation, one prime minister. Always. अब क्या चल रहा है? One nation, one pass. One nation, one pass. Now it is fundamentally talking about what, my dear? A transit for timber, such that I don't need any sort of breakages or I don't need any sort of permission at every stage that I pass. I'm going to have an hassle-free movement that I see. Because at the end of the day, what is going to happen, my dear? One major problem that I see in the context of Indian logistics sector is what? The cost of Indian logistics is around 16% of the GDP. But whereas when I look at the cost of logistics in the context of US or China, I see it is around roughly 9%. Now look at the difference that I see in the context. And when I have so much of logistic cost that is involved, automatically I will have to reduce the cost of logistics to ensure there is more profit. Now in that context, I talk about transit system. The other, one more categorical thing that you see in the context of reducing the logistic cost that you see, what about GST e-way bills? The GST e-way bills are also in this similar aspect. That is for transit over the road. This is especially in the context of timber. Next. Green Deal Industrial Plan. अरे एक टेक्निक में बता देता हूं आप लोग. Something which is related to Green Deal is mostly with respect to European Union, right? European Union keeps doing all good things most of the time. Something which is sustainable, something which is related to climate change law, something which is related to climate emergency, something which is related to digital systems, You would have heard about something called as GDPR. It is one of the data safety laws, one of the data safety regimes which have been introduced by whom? European Union. Regarding the digital systems and climate systems, you always take it for granted that European Union will be advanced. మనకు ఆప్షన్స్ లో యూరోపియన్ యూనియన్ కనిపించిందంటే ఏం చేయాలి? ఆన్సర్ అదే, రైట్? సో ఇలాంటి టెక్నిక్సే మనం డిస్కస్ చేయబోతున్నాం, డోంట్ వరీ. IPCC report. See, nothing much is there in IPCC. It says that we have already seen an increase in temperature by 1.1 degree. How much are we targeting? The maximum that we were targeting was 1.5 degrees. Initially we were saying 2 degrees, but now we are saying 1.5 degrees. But how much have we already raised by? 1.1 degree. To be very precise, 1.09 degrees is the IPCC 6th analysis which talks about. Now IPCC is an organization. It is made up of what, my dear? It is a composition of WMO and UNEP. It is a composition of WMO and UNEP. Does it undertake research? Does IPCC undertake research? It does not undertake research. It only analyzes the reports of the research which has been conducted by some other organizations. It does not engage in active research. Please remember. Is it a body of United Nations? Or is it a specialized agency of United Nations? It's a specialized agency or not? Yes, no. Is it a specialized agency of United Nations? It is not a specialized agency of United Nations. It neither undertakes research. Please remember that. Next. Global Greenhouse Gas Watch. By whom? WMO. Just remember that much. Water Conference. Now, why is this in news? That one water conference and the water conference which happened in 2023, almost there was a gap of 50 years. After nearly 50 years, this conference has been conducted recently. Where did they conduct? They conducted in New York. And what is the major aspect? You please refer to the outcome. One definite thing that they talk about is integrated water management. They talk about integrated water management. Now, in integrated water management, always remember 3 things will exist. One thing is you will have to manage land also. You will have to manage water also. You will have to also manage the biodiversity. Then only we call it as integrated water management. Water management does not deal only with water, remember. Water management does not deal only with water, but it also deals with the land, the water, as well as the biodiversity that is existing. Biodiversity, will it also include human beings? Yes or no? Definitely yes, right? Next. Now, giving to amplify earth action, it is given by whom? WEF. Right? You know that every January there is a meeting which goes on in Davos. Yes or no? Right? So giving to amplify earth action is what? It is given by WEF. Next, World Water Conference, again there was something which was given as W12 plus blueprint. That is also something related to water conference. State of Global Climate Report, given by whom? WMO. Most of the reports we had seen being given by whom? WMO. Understand this concept? Carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now here, we have been seeing one concept called as carbon leakage. What do you mean by this carbon leakage? Now, for suppose say there is country C1, there is country C2. Now, when I observe this country C1 and country C2, what has been happening? Now, this country wants to maintain a global perception that it is eco-friendly, wants to maintain a global perception that it is having the sustainable lifestyles, wants to maintain a global perception that it is managing all of its systems environmentally sustainable aspects. You would have heard about something called as greenwashing 2022. In greenwashing, what was happening? They perceive as if everything is sustainable. Now, in the same manner, this country wants to perceive that and wants to maintain that perception. What it does is, it reduces the carbon emissions in its country. But what it does is it takes all of its manufacturing units to this country and increases here. Telivi. Ati telivi. That is what is happening. What is happening here? One side they are saying we are cutting the carbon emissions. One side they are seeing that all of this manufacturing capacity is taken to some other country, and there what is happening? Increasing the carbon emissions. That means what? Carbon is being leaked from this country to other country. That is why we are calling it as what? Carbon leakage. Carbon border adjustment mechanism. इसमें क्या चल रहा है? हाँ, over. Last 20 minutes. मैं छोड़ देता हूँ. ఇప్పటికే చాలా ఎక్కువ. Right? Relax, we'll finish. So we see there was a leakage that was happening. Then European Union suddenly realized this. European Union suddenly realized this because what was happening when you don't think that C2 was importing carbon from C1 virtually? Was it asking? No, but it is perceived to be importing. So in that context, what European Union came and said, Baba, we will impose something called as carbon border adjustment mechanism. That means whatever the carbon tax that you are paying or that a country of European Union is paying, but any good which is coming from outside into the European Union, depending upon its carbon emissions, it will have to pay the carbon tax. I repeat, that's say, I'm saying, I'm taking one country for suppose say, UK is not part of EU. ठीक है, कुछ country ले लो यार, some X, okay, X, right? Now don't ask me, sir, tell me the name of the country which is starting with X. Okay. Now some X, now it is belonging to European Union. You know that European Union has this carbon tax wala mechanism. Now when you look at this carbon tax wala mechanism, what is happening? How much ever I produce, the amount of carbon that is produced, I will have to pay tax on it. Right? What is a name for that? Is there any name? In economy, we study something like this. But have heard about something called as Pigovian tax. What is Pigovian tax? Sin tax. A carbon tax is an example for Pigovian tax. बोल सकते हैं क्या? What is Tobin tax? Tobin tax is which is imposed on FIIs, foreign institutional investments. वो अलग है. This is what? Pigovian tax, sin tax. To disincentivize a particular mechanism is what is seen as Pigovian. For example, samosa tax imposed by Kerala. Telsa? Yes, fat tax. That is what? Fundamentally, Pigovian tax. Right? So here, for suppose a country which is belonging to European Union is paying some tax on carbon, say it is paying 10 rupees. It is paying 10 rupees for emitting 10 kgs of carbon. Just a hypothetical condition. Now there is some good which is coming from outside. But generally what we have seen is this good is being brought and sold here. And these people were not paying any tax. These people were not paying any tax. That means what is happening? Don't you think the virtually the European Union is importing what? Carbon. Because at the end of the day, disposal mechanism, the utility mechanism will be having some carbon release. Now in that context, we are not ready to import carbon, but we will charge. At this border, it started imposing this carbon tax. For what purpose? Adjusting. What are they adjusting? The levels of carbon that is present in that particular region. So remember the CBAM mechanism is like a carbon tax, but which is imposed not within the country, but those goods which are coming from outside. That's it. Okay? Beautiful. Now also remember one more thing, there are specified sectors initially in the first phase. Not that all the sectors are present, roughly around 6 sectors are specified in the first phase, right? Next. Carbon leakage हमने discuss किया, dialogue on climate change. आप लोग इसको climate finance हमने discuss किया, कितना adaptive fund, mitigation fund, GCF, GEF, and now what we discussed, loss and damage. Carbon budget. Now in Rajya Sabha they said, what was the context of discussing carbon budget? In Rajya Sabha they said we have utilized 80% of our carbon budget. What is carbon budget? Right? What is your pocket money? That's your budget. Right? That means if I'm having 100 rupees as my pocket money, what is my budget? How much I can spend maximum? 100. Yes. In the similar manner, when I talk about carbon budget, it talks about what is the maximum amount of carbon that can be emitted. What is the amount of carbon that can be emitted is carbon budget. The amount of carbon that is being emitted is what is called as carbon footprint. What is carbon footprint? The amount of carbon that is being emitted. What is carbon budget? The amount of carbon that can be emitted. నా దగ్గర 100 రూపాయలు ఉందయా. I'm having 100 rupees. That is my budget. That can be spent is 100 rupees. I'm buying this pen at 20 rupees. Now this 20 rupees is what? Carbon footprint. 100 rupees is what? Carbon budget. That can be emitted is budget. That is being emitted is footprint. And we know that India happens to be the fourth largest. India happens to be the fourth largest after whom, my dear? China, US, European Union. China, US, European Union, and India happens to be the fourth largest. Then apart from that, we also see India accounts for less than 4%. Less than 4% of the total emissions which are existing. Right? So this is one small thing that you'll have to understand. Now, you should also know, sir, what is my reference here? If I'm telling that I can only emit this much, what is my reference? My reference at the end of the day is what, my dear? How much ever I emit, I should ensure that the 1.5 degrees temperature raise is not happening. That is my reference point. How much ever I am emitting, the 1.5 degree temperature raise should not happen, and that is what is considered as budget. Always remember that. Okay. Next. Okay, yaar baat. Carbon registry. Carbon registry means what? Register of carbon. Right? It's like an inventory source. What is the source? What is the sink that is existing? That is what is carbon registry. Next, green energy corridor. Green energy, I told you, anything that is green is what, my dear? Eco-friendly. That means this is majorly what? This is majorly renewable energy. And why are we talking about corridors, my dear? We're talking about corridors because we are sending it out. We are looking at the transmission. We are not looking at the generation. Remember this. In green energy corridors, we are looking at the transmission of renewable energy. We are not looking at the generation. And in this process, we see around, are we doing it in all states? No, 8 states. We are doing it in all states or no? We are doing it in 8 states. Remember this much, right? Remember this much that we are doing it in 8 states. Next. How do you pronounce this as? Emma mammitasa. Mammatus clouds. When I talk about mammatus clouds, now for suppose simply understand this is one cloud, right? Normal cloud, manlo. Now suddenly something is happening inside. What is happening? The interplay of the forces. Now when something is happening, what has happened? Something has happened. What is that something? Look at the base. The base of the cloud is distorted. Those clouds which have the disturbed base is what is called as mammatus clouds. Very disturbing unda? Easy unda? Ledu, disturbing undi. Yenduku? Disturbing base. That is why we are calling it as mammatus. Right? Generally, we see that it is majorly in cumulonimbus. Cumulonimbus clouds are the reasons for what kind of rainfall? Convective, orographic, or frontal? Emma? Convective. మొన్న పడిందే అదేంటి? ఓరోగ్రఫిక్ కొండ ఎక్కడుందా? ప్రగతి భవనా? సారీ, ప్రజల భవన్. ఇప్పుడు ఏదో భవన్ మార్చారు కదా, ప్రజాభవన్. ఓకే, ఇది ఓరోగ్రఫిక్ ఆర్ కన్వెక్టివ్? Convective, right? What is the characteristic feature of convective rainfall? Long periods or short periods? Short periods. Large area or smaller area? Smaller area. High intensity or low intensity? High intensity. Beautiful. Right? ఇప్పుడు మళ్ళీ వర్షం పడాలి. ఎందుకు మీరు జాగ్రఫీలో క్వశ్చన్ ఇంత కాన్ఫిడెంట్ గా ఆన్సర్ చేశారు? క్లౌడ్ ఫారెస్ట్. The forest which is near to the clouds. Please, right, for those who are not used to my teaching, you ask the person who is used to it. They will see me teaching like that only. What is climate change? Change in ideka. All those who are screaming are my ex-students. Existing students also, some are there, right? Forest which is close to cloud. Which forest is close to clouds, my dear? Alpine forest. Alpine forest. Right? Alpine. Yes. That is how we learn for civil services. You people are like, alpine forest? It is that high altitude forest? Come on, my dear. Keep it simple. What is the principle of UPSC? KISS. Keep it simple and short. Right? So all that alpine forest, where is the alpine forest generally found? Somewhere that region. Right? And so if I move higher, what do I find? Mountain. Mountain forest. What are mountain forest? Mountain forest is mountain forest. What is the spelling of mountain? Please understand. That is how we remember. So what is the categorical feature here? This is one. And one more thing that we'll see. Increased stem diversity but lower diversity of woody plants. Now what is an epiphytic structure? Epiphytic structure is that structure when I talk about, now for suppose say if the density of the trees is very, very large, I know that there is no penetration of sunlight which happens. When I don't have the penetration of sunlight, there is no undergrowth which is present. And when I don't have the undergrowth, I know that this is one of the characteristic features which are existing in an evergreen forest. Now in that context, what do I see? In order to access to the sunlight, I see a kind of the adaptive feature which is existing, and these structures which are climbing over the trees and moving to access the sunlight are what are called as epiphytic. Epi means what? At the circumference. Phytic, phytos means what? Plants. At the circumference of the plants, epiphytic plants. And what is the kind of species interaction that is happening here? The kind of species interaction is what? It is commensalism, amensalism, mutualism, neutralism. It is commensalism. Commensalism. The epiphytic structure is gaining, but the plant or the tree over which it is moving up is neither losing nor gaining. That is why it is commensalism. Beautiful. See, this program is named as Species Tour. Right? Every day towards the end, last 5-10 minutes, we will look at species. Right? Olive Ridley turtles. One small thing that you'll have to understand about olive ridleys is they are the smallest. So beautiful they are. Right? I feel like sitting here, my dear. So beautiful they are. Right? ఎందుకో నాకు 2-3 చూసినప్పుడు అలా అనిపిస్తుంది. ఒకటి క్రొకడైల్, అలా టర్టిల్ ఎందుకు నిదానంగా వెళ్తుంటదా వెళ్ళి, I don't know, right? What is the status? Vulnerable, sites, appendix. From this year we will have to focus on this categorically. Till this year we were only remembering IUCN status, but now onwards we will have to remember the status of sites. Why? Because when you look at the amendment that was brought in, I see Schedule 4 of the Wildlife Protection Act talks about sites convention. All those species which are present in sites are considered to be part of Schedule 4 of Wildlife Protection Act. Previously in 1972 Act, how many schedules I had? 6. But now how many I am having? 4. In that 3 are related to animal, and the 4th one is what, which is related to sites. The sites is also called as Washington Convention. Sites is also called as Washington Convention. Yes, what is Washington Consensus? IMF and World Bank. Formation of IMF and World Bank is Washington Consensus. This is Washington Convention. Right? Next, Wildlife Protection Act, Schedule 1, raised in the warm waters. And you'll have to remember that it is omnivorous. It is omnivorous. It is not herby. It is not carni. It is omni. Are we omnivores? Yes, right? So this is one thing. And one thing that you need to remember about them is what? They have one capacity called nesting. Right? Where are they present? In the regions of Odisha and Andhra. Regions of Odisha and Andhra. Are they present only on the eastern coast of India? Are they present in western coast also? Only eastern coast. Only eastern coast. Remember. Now just because I'm telling only, don't change your stand there. Next. Pangolin. Right? So cute. Kada? Right? Chuchu. You're so cute, man. I don't know. What status? कब पूछा था यार pangolin? 2021 में. Hedgehog, marmot, pangolin. Which of the following has a defensive mechanism of rolling to protect? In that what? Pangolin and hedgehog. Pygmy hog. Will it have the habit of rolling? Yes or no? No. Right? So next, endangered. Appendix is what? Sites. 1. Wildlife Protection Act. Schedule 1. World Pangolin Day. When? 4 days after Valentine Day. 18th Feb. Yes or no? 18th Feb. Right? The pangolin is the most trafficked. Obviously. It's so cute. Right? One more, remember. It's the only mammal which has scales. It is the only mammal which has scales. Which is the only mammal which is egg laying? Duck-billed platypus. Please remember. Only egg laying is what? Duck-billed platypus. This is what? Only mammal with scales. Now we know in India we have Indian pangolin as well as Chinese pangolin. Both are there. Kada? Indian cuisine undi, Chinese cuisine undi. We have noodles also, we have biryani also, we have sambar also. Right? Biryani is not Indian, sorry. Sambar and noodles. So we have Indian and Chinese. Right? What is the status of Chinese? C undi. So critically endangered. Vallepudu critical hai, useless fellows. So Chinese pangolins are what? Critically endangered. Next. Sloth bear. అందులో ఓ అనడానికి ఏముందమ్మా దగ్గరికి వెళ్ళానండి ఓ స్లాత్ బేర్ ఇస్ ద స్టేటస్ vulnerable sites appendix 1 right wildlife schedule 1 where is it majorly present my dear grasslands right they are majorly present in grasslands and remember one thing the sloth bears do not hibernate. Most of the bears hibernate. You know hibernation process, right? But sloth bears do not hibernate because one characteristic feature they have is the female sloth bear will dig a cave or dig a hole and it will take the male sloth bear there. Hibernate avvadaniki avasaram emundi? Why do we hibernate? To conserve the heat. Yes or no? See, look how favorable they are. That is what is called as denning. They create a den. That is why they are calling it as denning process. So remember that they don't hibernate. Normal bears hibernate. Lizards hibernate. Snakes hibernate. Yes or no? Yes. Right? Lesser flamingos. Now why is this in use? In fact, after 6 years, now they are back into Chilika Lake. And after 6 years, they are back into Chilika Lake. Right? So, what is the status? Near threatened. Sites is appendix 2. Now they have a specialized diet. They are vegans. And the species has a specialized diet. They are majorly dependent upon what, my dear? Microscopic, blue-green, algae and benthic diatoms. Diatoms are what, my dear? They are producers or consumers? Diatoms are producers. We know that 2 kinds of phytoplanktons are existing. One kind of phytoplankton is what, my dear? Diatoms. The other kind of phytoplanktons are what? Dinoflagellates. Both are what? Both are producers. That is why we are calling them as phytoplanktons. They are what are going to initiate your aquatic food chain. And on phytoplanktons, we are going to see zooplanktons depending on zooplankton, small fish, on small fish, large fish. Right? Next, are they endemic species to India? What do you mean by endemic species? Which are only present in India, which are native to India, which are only present in India. Is pygmy hog endemic to India? Yes or no? Yes or no? No. But is it found only in Assam? Yes. Kashmir stag, endemic to India or not? పేర్లో ఉంది కదా కశ్మీర్, ఎవరిది? ఇండియాది. కశ్మీర్ stag, where is it? Endemic. Right? Lion tailed macaque, Western Ghats, endemic or not? Yes. Please remember this. Right? Last one, last animal, greater scaup. They found this in Manipur, Loktak Lake. It's a cute duck. It's a migratory species, remember that. Now most of you will get a doubt, sir, how can ducks migrate? Yes or no? మీకు ఎప్పుడు రాలేదా? రాలేదంటే మీరు ఆలోచించలేదు. They will edify. They will swim. So that is why they what? They are migratory. You please understand, we have something called as Convention on Migratory Species. CMS, that is what is called as Bonn Convention. And when you talk about this Convention on Migratory Species or Bonn Convention, we have 3 types of species. One is either terrestrial, avian species or aquatic species. So an aquatic species can also be a migratory species. Right? For the first time they found it where, my dear? In Loktak Lake. Yes. Right? Thank you, my dear. We'll meet tomorrow.